So, what happens when cultures mix, clash, or just get a little spicy?
We grab a hot pot.
Yes, and talk about life, culture,
and all the delicious chaos in between.
Hi, I'm Jenny.
I'm Lillian, and we are
Hot Pot Takes 火锅闲话。
Nezha picks up the sword. You evil kings, don't harm others. I alone will take responsibility for my actions. This is the moment that defines Nezha.
No one could stay unmoved by these heart-wrenching moments.
Actually, it reimagines pretty much every character we knew from the original Nezha story.
For someone who's not a huge fan of Nezha, still I have to admit that I had a fun time watching it.
The time when Albin showed up in the movie, the whole cinema just go, wow, he was so gorgeous.
Immediately hooked up.
yeah, immediately hooked up. I actually loved Shen Gongbao much more than Albin and the Nezha in the second franchise.
Oh, really?
Our beloved Lady Yin was dead. Prepare Nezha to become the hero he was supposed to be.
This just makes her feel like a plot device. I mean, a woman in a fridge.
Nezha, in every incarnation, forces us to ask, what in this era is worth fighting for?
On the last episode, we talked about the origins of Nezha's story and also touched a bit on the 1979 movie. So what are we talking about today?
Today, we could continue talking about this classic 1979 movie. Last time I've mentioned like how beautiful this movie was, and we've watched together a few clips, and also we talked about the music. But today, in the beginning, I really want to talk about its like heart-wrenching part. It was beautiful, but at the same time, it was so heart-wrenching. It was brutal and it was awakening. The climax part is exactly the part that make your heart just ache so much. But it also like taught you so much. It also made you think about so much. So maybe today we could like start it by talking about this climax part of this really classic movie.
Sure, let's do it. I can't wait.
Yes, okay. So I think before we move in directly to this climax part, I really have to lay clear for our audience who are the main characters in this movie and what does relationships look like in this movie. First and foremost, of course, we've got this the main character, our hero, Nezha. He, as we've shown in last episode, Nezha was this curious, happy little kid who lived in Chentang Pass, and he had a very loving relationship with his butlers, with his neighbors, right? He loved the people of his neighborhood dearly.
Yeah.
And we could say that he was this kind of figure who was deeply connected to his community. And then, of course, there was other like characters, the Dragon Clan, which centered around a Dragon King, and there was also the Dragon King's son, whose name was Albin. And then also the fellow peers of this Dragon King. The Dragon Clan, we could say they were the major antagonists in this movie. To summarize them very simply, they were greedy bullies. The Dragon Kings in China's mythological system, they are in charge of like rain, snow, floods, and every other natural phenomenon, right?
And also there are like 4 Dragon Kings, right? This one is the which one? The East one? Or...
This one, he was the Dragon King of the East Sea. Yes, there were Dragon Kings of the 4 oceans, and then our main character here was the Dragon King of the East Sea. He had these fellow peers who were in charge of the West Sea, the South Sea, and the North Sea, but they were not the major characters.
Okay, got it.
And the Dragon Kings, they're in charge of natural phenomenon, and they are, well, they're supposed to protect. They're supposed to provide for the land. They're supposed to guarantee there was a harvest. That's the reason why people worship them. But here in this movie, they use this power not to protect, not to provide, but they use this power basically to threaten the people, to ask for ransoms, to ask for, oh, you have to worship me, young boys and young girls, so that I could give you good weathers.
So there's conflict between him and Nezha. That's why the movie is called Nezha Conquer the Dragon King.
Yes, we've talked about how terrible this movie was translated. That was exactly why. And then we had another very important character, Nezha's father, Li Jing. Well, he was portrayed in this movie, well, my word, quite impotent, weak, a coward. He was still the general of the Chentang Pass. He was supposed to protect his people, right? But he seemed quite indifferent to the people's sufferings and just blindly bowed to the Dragon King's authority.
The interesting thing is, in history, the real Li Jing is a very brave general, right? So why is he portrayed as so cowardly person here?
Well, I think that's really a good question. Indeed, Li Jing, this historical figure, was a general in the Tang Dynasty, and he fought many battles. He won many battles. He fought back enemies. So that was the reason he was worshipped back in the Tang Dynasty. But think about it. The fact is, we don't know what kind of father Li Jing is in his family life.
That's true.
I think here is a very interesting phenomenon. We could see hundreds of times this very typical, this very common father figure in Chinese, especially in Chinese historical dramas, this kind of 大家长, the very patriarchal father figures.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes, right. I think it reflects a very deliberate cultural storytelling choices. We've seen many kind of historical dramas that this kind of father, they prioritizes family interests over anything else. In their belief system, social status of the family comes first, and the political survival comes first. His duty is to guarantee that the family would pass from generation to generation. And he's not like the very warm or protecting mom who cares about, oh, how my son feels like today, if my daughter was hurt today. This is a very typical like father figure we could see from many movies, many TV series.
So in this kind of storytelling, individual faith or their interests can be sacrificed in extreme situations.
Yeah, exactly. Family interest comes first. He's this kind of a father that for them, their duty is not to their sons, is not to their daughters, is not to their wives. Their duties is to the system.
Makes sense in a way, but that's so sad, I mean.
That's exactly why in Chinese historical dramas, we like to portray this kind of father. I think that's more like a cultural trauma in Chinese memories. I think that's a reflection of modern China. That look at this very patriarchal, this very authoritarian fathers in the past, that we don't want fathers again of this kind of figures. So I think that that's a good thing, right? If we lay this problem out clearly, if we portray this kind of problematic fathers out on TV screens, there's a good reason that modern day males see this kind of father, they tend to understand that, oh, I don't want to be a father, a husband like that. Back to the main characters of Nezha's movie, we have this last figure, also a father figure, but quite different. 太乙真人, Nezha's master. He does not show up very often because he's like an immortal, practicing away in his own cave. But every time he shows up, he appears to be a very loving and supportive figure in Nezha's life. Yeah. Till now, we've already know that the Dragon King was this bully that has done no good. It is inevitable that Nezha clashed with the Dragon clan. Nezha actually killed the Dragon King's son, Bin.
Yes.
Yeah. At this point, of course, the Dragon King would blame everything on Nezha. He allied with the Dragon Kings of the other three oceans, threatening to flood Chentang Pass unless Nezha surrenders. What would you think that Li Jing would do at this moment?
Based on what you have said, I think he would definitely suck up to the Dragon King. So what would he do to Nezha? I think he would not stand up for him, right? Will probably beat him, or I don't know, like blame him for killing Albin, or force him, to surrender.
Exactly. You know this kind of father too well. He yelled at Nezha. He blamed Nezha, like, how dare you harm the Tianshen Longzhong, which means the heavenly god and the heir to the powerful Dragon King. From this line, you could get that his father don't care about whether Nezha has done the correct thing or whether Nezha has been hurt. All he cares is that Nezha has infuriated this heavenly god. Yeah, that was Li Jing. Bear in mind that actually the Dragon King, even with the Dragon Kings of the four oceans together, they are no match for Nezha in power. But Li Jing, coward that he is, he blamed Nezha for everything, and he took away all of Nezha's weapons and tied Nezha up.
That's still way too much, even though I have known that he is such a not bully, but like important person. But still, how could it be so brutal to his own son? I mean, Nezha is his own son, right? I really hate him for that.
I think that's kind of like a reflex of a patriarchal father. The reflex is that you could not infuriate an important person. And then with all this happening, so the story gradually leads to the climax part. I think here we better imagine that we had a camera. Let's just zoom in on the scene to see what happens there.
Okay,
First,
sure.
Let's zoom in at the Dragon Kings of the four oceans. They're standing in the clouds, they're summoning storms, they are bringing floods into Chentang Pass. At the same time, they're demanding Nezha's life. And then we switch our cameras into the people of the Chentang Pass. They are helpless. They are crying for help. They're drowning in despair. And what about Nezha? Now stripped of his weapons, he stands there, helpless, his fists clenched tight, but his power restrained. Let's turn our camera to Li Jing. He held his sword lashed out at his own son. And here is what he said to Nezha. 逆子, you disobedient son. Your mother and I raised you with flesh and bones, and now you've dragged us down with you. What use are you to me? Now imagine that. The camera pans faster and faster, switching between the furious father, Li Jing, the wrathful Dragon Kings, and the helpless civilians. Meanwhile, the background symphony and the pipa build up the tension higher and higher until it feels like the world is about to explode. And then, in a moment of devastating clarity, Nezha picks up the sword. His voice is steady, but filled with resolve. You evil kings, don't harm others. I alone will take responsibility for my actions.
老妖龙，你听着，我一人做事一人当，不许你们祸害别人。
At this moment, he turned to his father, defiant, saying that, 爹爹, I return you your flesh and bones.
爹爹，你的骨肉，我还给你，我不连累你。
And all of a sudden, with a despairing cry, all the music cut out. The world falls silent. All we hear is the faint sound of the sword dripping with blood as it drops to the ground. This silence is deafening. And let's hold our camera, and the camera lingers on Nezha's lifeless body, the storm still raging in the background. The faces of those he loved, stunned, grief-stricken, and utterly lost. This is the moment that defines Nezha. Not his power, not his rebellion, but his sacrifice. It's a moment that leaves me breathless, leaves me heartbroken and in awe.
Yeah, this gave me goosebumps too. I guess no one could stay unmoved by these heart-wrenching moments. Neja's final defiance, the sound of the sword hitting the ground, the tears from his friends and companions. It was all so powerful and so contagious. What do you think was going on in Neja's mind in that final moment?
What was going on in Neja's mind? I think it is all crystal clear. Neja's every action speaks about his thoughts very clearly. There was definitely this searing anger or this rage, not only at the dragon clan's cruelness, but also at his father. I think this is why he cried, "Dear, I return you your flesh and bones.
Yeah.
I don't want to have anything to do with you." This is a very steadfast, a very determined cut away from his father.
Oh, yeah. Like I don't owe you anything anymore.
Yeah. It almost feels like a seismic rebellion, a cosmic rebellion, because in ancient Chinese, especially under the Confucianism doctrines, it was just outrageous for a son daring to speak so to his father. A
Yeah.
son is supposed to be obedient to his father.
Yeah. And also, like in traditional Chinese thought, there's that saying that your body, your hair, and your skin all come from your parents, so you should cherish them, and doing anything to harm them is seen as a serious offense, right? A major act of disrespect.
Yeah, I think Nezha basically gives a middle finger to these doctrines, but brutally by taking his own lives. Speaking about what was going on in Nezha's mind at that moment, I think there's also this devastating helplessness. He was disarmed there, unable to do anything to stop the Dragon Kings.
I mean, I can understand how desperate and how angry Nezha was at that critical moment. But did he have to end it all? I mean, was there any other way out?
Was there any other way out? I think no.
Not for Nezha.
No. Nezha was just not the kind of person. Surrender, of course, was never an option for Nezha. Just standing there doing nothing was not an option either. At this moment, there was just no way out for Nezha. Nezha killed himself. That was not a suicide. That is not a rejection of life. It is like the ultimate affirmation of life. I know this may sound very paradoxical. I want to say that he dies precisely because he cherishes life so fiercely.
Why is that?
Well, actually, in history, there's the great philosopher Socrates. He refused to renounce his own teachings. He would let his life be taken away by poison. And there was also the great poet Qu Yuan in ancient time. He would rather drown himself than surrender and serve his enemy regime.
Yeah, now I get it. Like, people really admire that kind of determination, the willingness to sacrifice yourself to protect something that you really cherish, right? Something that's so pure, so sacred that it mustn't be stained. That's their way of showing how deeply they cherish life. And also, you mentioned the poet Qu Yuan. Actually, that's the spirit behind the Dragon Boat Festival in China. It was originally held to commemorate him. People would throw 粽子, it's a kind of sticky rice dumplings, into the river to feed the fish, hoping the fish would eat those 粽子 instead of Qu Yuan's body. Back to Nezha. Still, I think this movie hit so hard with all these intensive emotions. I just wonder why.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that the movie hit so hard. After I watched this movie, I was actually in this very prolonged state of loss and sorrow. There was this very indescribable emptiness in me. I wondered why the crew members behind made this movie such a searing cry of pain. I think it has everything to do with the historical background here. Well, this was my personal understanding. The year this movie was made was actually an exceptional year. The year was 1979, a turning point in modern China. That year, the Gaokao system, kind of like the SAT in the United States, was resumed. But it was left in ruins in a decade of chaos. 1979 was actually an end to that decade of chaos.
Yeah.
But for many people living in that year, these previous years were unforgettable and also unspeakable. It was so dark, miserable. Things people used to believe to be right, used to believe to be true, were brutally crushed. People of that age, they have the sense of anger, the sense of loss, the sense of pain that was just engraved so deeply in their hearts. And I think people at that time, they needed this movie. They needed a movie like Nezha to remember and lament what they have went through. And also they desperately needed a hero like Nezha, who was steadfastly just, who refused to bow to corrupt morals of authority. And then this Nezha was also their projection of the future, their expectation of the future, and their determination that they would usher in a different future, that the things they cherished would be protected and would pass on from generation to generation.
Yeah, I think if you put yourself in these people's shoes, like they had gone through such a long period of depression and darkness, they needed something inspiring, right? Something they could hold on to. So I think like Nezha at that time, he just showed up as that hope, that very hope these people need badly.
Yes, Nezha was the hope. Their projection into the future was the beautiful embodiment they wanted into the future. And also the movie was like a reflection. The movie was here to remind that the kind of mistakes they used to make could not be made again.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Anyway, this 1979 movie is definitely a very classic version of Nezha's story. But we also have newer franchise, right? And we all know that new Nezha franchise, which was made in 2019 and then this one 2025. They tell a different story from that 1979 version. So what exactly is this franchise about?
I think before we directly going into the storylines of this movie, I really wanted to share like how I felt after I watched the movie. If you ask me to pick a word for it, I would choose the word refreshing. Because I've watched Nezha adaptations like for so many years since I was little, but I have never seen a Chinese mythological figure interpreted in such a very different way. Actually, it reimagines pretty much every character we knew from the original Nezha story.
Yeah, I totally agree about that. I actually watched the first movie in the series, and for someone who's not a huge fan of Nezha, still I have to admit that I had a fun time watching it, especially with his smoky eyes, buck teeth, and that swaggy I don't care attitude. This Nezha feels like completely different from what I have always heard about.
Yeah, exactly. That was my word. Well, I was a Nezha fan.
I know.
From every one of this TV series, cartoons, and the movie, Nezha has always been this very typical textbook good guy. I mean, you can immediately get this vibe of righteousness, this vibe of justice from Nezha's looks.
True.
But in this movie here, Nezha has this smoky eyes, buck teeth. He got this kind of look that you just wouldn't remember and wouldn't bother to remember. Well, think about how interesting it was. And also, I think there's another figure that just kind of robbed my heart away. That was Albin. In the 1979 movie, Albin was this wicked son of the Dragon King who was killed by Nezha. Yeah. But here, Albin was actually the textbook good guy. Wow, he was perfect from his looks.
Good-looking guy, right?
The time when Albin showed up in the movie, the whole cinema just go, wow, he was so gorgeous.
Immediately hooked up.
yeah, immediately hooked up. He was the heartthrob of this movie.
Okay, enough about him.
So I was wondering, like, do you have this kind of a figure that just impressed you the most?
I think actually what impressed me most was Nezha's appearance. We have discussed with the 1979 version that brutal, bad dad Nezha had, right? But luckily in this franchise, his parents were very loving and supportive, both his mom and dad, which is a really nice change. And then there is Shen Gongbao, the main villain in the first movie. I thought all his scenes would be like dark and scary, but the director made him stutter. So the way, he talks actually makes him seem kind of cute and funny.
Yes. In many films, the main characters often like emerge from very broken backgrounds. They had to endure immense hardships, and then they finally rise from these traumas. This was the very classic bitter vendetta archetype.
Yeah.
But here, Nezha was coming from a very loving family. His father was not the very like stereotypical authoritarian father we just talked about. He was caring for his family.
Yeah.
And most importantly, he was present all along in Nezha's upbringing. That was something very new. Another figure I really loved so much is Nezha's mother. She has been always this very nameless and faceless figure in all previous Nezha stories. But in this movie, we got to see the look of Nezha's mother finally. Also, she got a career herself. She was a Lady Ying. She was the Lady General. I couldn't agree more with what you said about Shen Gongbao. He basically stole the show, I think. He made the whole cinema erupt in laughter. That's why exactly I would pick the word refreshing for this movie. The little villain here, he was crafted with such charm that you just can't help but find him cute and funny. Well, here's a spoiler alert. In the sequel, Shen Gongbao's character was fleshed out more. He was transformed from a very simple antagonist in the first franchise to a wonderfully complex character in the second franchise.
Wow.
I actually loved Shen Gongbao much more than Albin and Nezha in the second franchise.
Oh, really? Now I'm more curious about him. But first things first, what kind of stories do these two movies actually tell?
Yeah, let's talk about the first movie. It is tightly centered around one thing: self-identity. In the first movie, everything started with 浑圆珠. Well, maybe our audience will find 浑圆珠 very puzzling. We could basically imagine it as the symbol of Taiji. It's similar toward the concept of yin and yang. It has one side known as the spiritual pearl, represents light and justice, and then the other side is known as the demon orb, embodies the dark side. It embodies destruction.
So evil part and the good part.
Yes, evil part and good part. And these two are actually inseparable parts, consisting in one. This was how fate was meant to unfold. The fate dictates that the spiritual pearl to be incarnated as Nezha, and then the demon orb to be destroyed. But in reality, Shen Gongbao, the scheming antagonist in the first franchise, he stole the spiritual pearl. He gave it to the Dragon King. So instead, Nezha was born from the demon orb, while Albin, he became the spiritual pearl.
So their fates were deliberately twisted.
Yes. The scale of destiny tipped. And this actually planted the seed of all the struggles throughout the movie for our main characters, Nezha and Albin. Nezha could have become the revered chosen one, but now he was a cursed child. He was the demon child, destined to bring destruction, and he was supposed to be annihilated. For this reason, Nezha was hated. He was loathed, he was feared and rejected by everyone.
Poor Nezha.
Yeah, at this point, we kind of get like this I don't give a buck attitude from him. I think this kind of like his camouflage. Deep down, Nezha was actually very lonely and an insecure kid who longed for acceptance. Yeah, who longed for love and recognition. But prejudice here is an insurmountable mountain. So that was the struggle Nezha had to deal with.
Yeah. So he kind of used all the bad side or the indifference to protect himself.
Yes, exactly. That was his armor. Well, let's look at Albin's side. One might assume that, Albin's life must have been so good because now he was born from the spiritual pearl. He must have been destined for grace and honor. But no, fate is never kind. Well, the reason was Albin was born a dragon. Dragons were powerful yaoguais, feared and shackled away by the celestial palace. And they were punished, bound in fiery chains under the sea, and they were condemned eternally there as the jailers to suppress the demons from under the seas. Albin was actually the last surviving heir to the Dragon King. He was basically the last hope of the whole family. His mission was very clear, to destroy the demon child and then earn his family the redemption and opportunity toward freedom. But Albin was born from the spiritual pearl. How does a boy forged from light reconcile with such a brutal mandate? He was supposed to kill someone for his family. The spiritual pearl shaped Albin's essence to be kind, just, gentle.
Yeah, that's against his nature, right?
Exactly. That was against his nature. Basically, the world demanded that Albin become a cruelest weapon. And to make things more complicated here, these two distinct rivals, Nezha and Albin, they found something unexpected in each other. A friend. Sometimes people found it very puzzling how come these two became friends. But I think it's quite understandable because they were two lonely souls and they shared similar destiny and they found solace in one another.
So it's like they love each other and they also fight with each other.
Yeah, exactly. Love-hate relationships between these two. When fate cornered them, when they were standing at the breaking point, the moment came for them to make the choice. I think their choice was quite clear. It was all summarized in Nezha's iconic line, 我命由我不由天. My fate is mine to command, not the heavens. Here was actually a very epic scene here. It also was a defining moment of the movie. Nezha here gave us the answer to this very timeless question of what the world demands we become versus what we choose to be.
Yeah, I also remember that final scene. It felt really fired up. I mean, full of passion and energy. and very contagious. But honestly, I felt like the overall story framework, the directions it takes, and even the twists along the way were a bit cliche. I mean, they are pretty predictable to me. It's also a pretty common trope in Hollywood, isn't it? Like a hero defies fate and forges their own path.
Yeah, I get it. I think, yes, this kind of defined hero trope is pretty common, not only in Hollywood, but also in China, I believe maybe in India, like in every corner around the world. But I think there's a reason why. Basically, what I'm saying is that cliches become cliches for a reason. People love this kind of cliche for a reason because it's a human reflex, kind of human gut instinct that we want to find about, we want to quest.
Yeah.
And I think that as humans, we have been wrestling with this issue of self-identity and also fate for as long as we are here, as long as we walk the earth. We have Gilgamesh dates like 4,000 years back who tore down gods, and we also have Hamlet grappled with his destiny. Yes, and today we have Nezha shouts, "My fate is mine to command, not the heavens." I think the answer is simple because every generation they have to answer this question anew.
Yeah, I agree with that point. Like, it's a question that everyone needs to answer. But honestly, I think in reality, the process of figuring out who you are might be a much longer journey, or maybe it never really ends.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, fair enough. So then what about the sequel? Does it explore a new theme, or is it still focused on self-identity?
The sequel dealt with a different theme, actually. Well, in this movie, the director introduced new villains with immense power and weakness. The movie basically raised the stakes higher and expanded the scale of the story much larger. The sequel actually explored a broader and perhaps also not a new theme, the nature of good versus evil.
Okay.
Yeah. I think actually the antagonist in the first franchise, Shen Gongbao, was actually a figure better manifested the conflict of being good or evil.
So what kind of character was him?
Well, to understand what kind of character or what kind of person Shen Gongbao was, I think we have to understand his background. Shen Gongbao was also a Yao Guai, this kind of animal spirits. They were considered lower, inferior to human species. But Shen Gongbao was not a common Yao Guai because he was a one that aspired to cultivate the Tao and ascend to immortality. So for this ambition, he worked tirelessly, day and night, and basically clawed his way up to the celestial palace. Well, he became the pride of his family, and he was the role model of his little brother.
But why did he want to cultivate the Tao and attain the immortality?
I think he was because he was this ambitious kid. He wasn't content with what fate gave him. As a Yao Guai, you were not supposed to dream big. There was a belief that Yao Guai was born evil. Shen Gongbao is this kind of person saying, I could do more than that. I could do good. I could have a position in the celestial palace. Then I could do good to the world. That was perhaps the reason why he wanted to attend this kind of...
Like, he is a very ambitious person.
Exactly. He was very ambitious. Change it.
He didn't believe in his fate and...
Exactly. I think he did it. He made it half. Yes, indeed. He became a member of the Celestial Palace. But again, fate is never kind. And the reality was really cruel. He found out that this jade-tiled Celestial Palace was rotten to its root. He climbed up there only to be a filthy executioner. He was like the cleanup man. Yeah, to kill and then to tidy up the mess. And also because of his background as a Yao Guai, he was easily used as a scapegoat.
This experience must have shattered his dreams.
Yes, indeed. I think at this moment, we could get why Shen Gongbo was so bitter, so scheming, why Shen Gongbo teamed up with the Dragon King to steal the spiritual pearl. It is, once again, a desperate act of a cornered animal in a system where the celestial palace holds absolute power, and it literally played the ultimate God role. And the choice you got is either to play along or you get crushed, you get killed. But Shen Gongbo, he chose a third way. Yes, if we looked from the perspective of Nezha, especially from the lens of the first franchise, Shen Gongbo was very petty, was bitter, was cynical. But yeah, all this time he had been very protective of Albin, and I think that's the tender part in him. There was also this moment where Chen Tang Pass was besieged at the order of the Dragon King due to some misunderstandings. Shen Gongbo was made the commander-in-chief to lead the besiege. Actually, he was not a cruel killer as we would imagine him to be. Yeah, he sent in supplies of medicine. For many viewers like me, we kind of saw ourselves in Shen Gongbo. Shen Gongbo was like this ultimate small-town dreamer. He had big ambitions.
Worked hard, right?
Yeah, he clawed his way up, but the reality struck hard. He's this kind of person who fought twice as hard for only half as much. But he kept his soul. His story raised the question, can you stay kind in a world that rewards cruelty?
Well, yeah, that's a very profound question that really makes you question your soul. Like dragging it into the spotlight and taking a long, hard look. Like, I mean, yeah, I always say that real life is very complicated, and in extreme situations, if putting your own interests first, thinking of only yourself is the only way to survive, then it's hard to blame someone for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like everyone can ask yourself this question. Like, if you were in the same situation, would you really act any better than Shen Gongbo did?
Well, you've raised a very good point. Put ourselves into Shen Gongbo's shoes. Would you do better? No. I would be so furious toward the whole system. I would just rip the table apart.
Right, yeah, that's true. Like, if I am honest, I probably wouldn't say a firm yes either. When you have pushed it so far, you might just go to extremes. Like, as you said, you can take brutal revenge on the system, or you just completely give up yourself.
Yes, me too.
Shen Gongbo did a great job, actually. As you said, he kept his soul, right? And he has this kindness, tender part. And I appreciate how this movie captured the complexity of humanity here.
I think Shen Gongbo is an epitome of how complicated human nature is. We've briefly touched upon this in last episode. The world is so full of ambiguity.
Right, blurry, yeah.
Yeah, it's just not right to look at things through a single lens.
Right, that's true, yeah.
I saw some of me in Shen Gongbo and I applaud for him too.
Yeah, but still, like, why do you think him is more likable than Nezha? After all, Nezha is a big hero, like the true hero in this movie who ultimately defeated the big boss, right?
Why do I find Shen Gongbo more likable than Nezha? Yes, Nezha ultimately saved the day. He defeated the big boss. But I just didn't feel the emotional journey that Nezha was supposed to have. And I think this is very important. Let me explain why. In this first half of this movie, he was sent on a mission to get past 3 trials set up by the big boss or the celestial palace so that he could retrieve a potion that could save Albin. These trials involved getting rid of 3 groups of Yao Guais. You'd think as smart as Nezha, he would send something off, but no. Nezha remained completely unfazed throughout these 3 trials. He witnessed this innocent Yao Guai being cruelly punished, crushed. But he was not touched a bit. He stood there just watching. It's kind of like he left his head back home and his heart was just as hard as a stone.
He only focused on his completion, like completion killers.
Yeah, he was like a machine programmed to kill.
Yeah,
there was
right.
a much worse part later in this movie, and it was just unbelievable. There was a scene where Chen Tang Pass was burned to charts. When you were at the cinema, you could see the burned corpses. The macho guy with this girly, high-pitched shriek. This little girl that Nezha used to be friended with and he used to save. They were all lying there. It was absolutely shocking, even as an audience member, to see this. It was heartbroken. But Nezha, he was, again, untouched. He only cared about the traces of his parents. Yes, Nezha saved the day. Where does this detrimental power come from? It came because his mom was dead.
Well, at least he cared about his parents.
His power was triggered by his mom's death.
They made a Lady Yin dead in that movie.
Yes, our beloved Lady Yin was dead. For what? To propel Nezha's explosion of power, to prepare Nezha to become the hero he was supposed to be. I was so frustrated about this part.
Yeah.
You know how I was praising this film for refreshing, and the director was not making a female character this invisible, faithless, always sacrifice figure. And now he went and arranged the mother's death to propel Nezha into becoming the hero. So that was just funny.
Yeah, I mean, the mom is still like sacrificed to pave the way for Nezha's big showdown, right? This just makes her feel like a plot device. I mean, a woman in a fridge. How's that any better than being invisible?
Exactly. How is that any better than being invisible? Lady Yin would be so happy to finally make it to the women in the refrigerator list. Honestly, I was a bit let down with the sequel. I was also disappointed with the portrayal of Nezha in this movie. And I think the director simply wanted to make Nezha a well-deserved hero that finally saves the day. But this hero rings hollow to me because there's no real emotional evolution. I just saw a reckless kid who has swamped this temper tantrums for righteous violence after his mom's death. He didn't grow. He just found a socially and morally acceptable target for his rage.
Yeah, that behavior, I don't know. I mean, like, I'm not sure he really qualifies as a hero. He was just acting out of his anger.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, being a hero means more than that. Like, do you have something truly precious that you want to protect? Or are there any values you stand for, like what Nezha did in the 1979 version? Or any other inner struggles you go through to figure out who you are, like we saw in the first movie. But yeah, none of them showed up in this movie. So there should be some real spiritual growth. And it's not like you are just born to be a hero. So everything you do automatically proves that you are one. A hero is cultivated, not born to be.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you. A hero made without reason and logic is just a cardboard cutout. Sarcastically, it's a typical hero in the book of Investor of Gods.
That's true. But yeah, all right, we have talked a lot about Nezha in both the 1979 film and the newer franchise. But if you had to sum each of them up in just a few words, what do you say?
To sum each of them up in just a few words, for the latest Nezha, I got this very Gen Z vibe because he's got swagger. If I have to choose one word to describe the 1979 Nezha, it'll be 君子, a man with noble spirit, because he was kind and compassionate. He cared for that his family, he cared for justice, and also a rebel for him, because I think he's the true rebel. He's like the guy who would go against a whole system, the authority for the commons.
Why do you think the core traits of Nezha are so different in these two versions?
And simple answer would be that time is different. I definitely see a shift toward individuality. It is obvious that the 1979 Nezha film, he was a blade forged in collectivism, a hero who stood steadfastly for his people, and he would not cave in the face of the privileged, and he would not hesitate a bit to sacrifice himself for his fellow villagers. This Gen Z Nezha battles something more intimate, but equally formidable, labels and prejudices. I remembered we used to discuss in private if this indicates a retreat from social responsibilities. Are the younger generations becoming too preoccupied with themselves to see beyond, to even care about the world beyond them? I think that was a question we too mentioned. But I want to do justice for the young people here. I don't think they do not care about the outside world. I don't think they are indifferent people, only caring about themselves. The truth is they are untethered. To give more context here, younger generations are constantly in motion, constantly move from one city to another, more often move from one released apartment to another. There was just no way for us to interact with our surroundings, to have the sense of belongings.
Yeah, like your whole life is built around your work instead of your neighborhood, your home, right? Relationships with people.
Yes, our mode of life is centered around work, productivity, and efficiency. We don't have time to establish connections. Also, this world is becoming super or hyper digitalized. Everything becomes transactional, which means food ordered just with a simple click of a button delivered to doors. We don't have to meet with the guy who cooked the food. We don't have to meet with the guy who delivered the food. Friendships are maintained through screens.
Yeah, that's true. It seems like everyday life has become really convenient, as you said. Like you can order food in and you don't even need to go to the supermarket, right? But that convenience actually comes at a cost. The services offered by different apps have built an invisible wall, I think, between you and your physical surroundings, especially your neighborhoods and communities.
Yes, exactly. Invisible walls. It seems like we are living in this hyper-connected world, but the reality is we are living in these isolated bubbles. I think that's why films like Nezha matter so profoundly, especially nowadays. The film could probe young people to think in this world of dizzying change, what do I want to be? Or 我想以什么样的态度与这个世界交互? So how do I want to interact with the world?
Yeah, I mean, like if you think of life as a journey through the sea, interpersonal interactions are like reference points. They help you sense where you are and where you are drifting. And without these reference points, there's no way to know how you are doing. As a result, you may feel insecure and anxious. Right. So I think in nowadays, these real personal interactions become more scarce. So it does get harder for young people to form or to understand themselves.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Interpersonal interactions, as you said, it's important. It acts like mirrors. This kind of interactions reflect parts of ourselves back to us. And then through this process, we come to realize and confirm who we are. But it is also a tricky question because this reflection from interactions can sometimes be mixed with noise. It might not only reflect our true selves, but also in a world of others, this kind of shared values of the mainstream society. It's particularly important in this world of change, in this world of noise, to distinguish our true self from the noise and from the expectation
from other people.
Yeah, exactly. this is actually a lifelong challenge, but it is a meaningful one. And I want to end today's discussion with a quote from DeepSeek. Here is the bittersweet truth both Nezhas share. Rebellion never goes out of style, but its language mutates. One tore down hierarchies, the other wrestles with alienation. One answered history, the other screams into the void of hyper-individualism. And that's why we keep retelling his story, because Nezha in every incarnation forces us to ask, what in this era is worth fighting for?
是否每种胜利都值得歌颂？是否竭尽全力，世界就不同？怎样呐喊能冲破绝望？怎样撕开命运的罗网？让这天地之间再无人阻挡。